James Earl Carter Jr. was born October 1, 1924, in Plains, Georgia, at the Y Sanitarium, where his mother worked as a registered nurse. Carter thus became the first American president born in a hospital. He was the eldest child of Bessie Lillian Gordy and James Earl Carter Sr., and a descendant of English immigrant Thomas Carter, who settled in the colony of Virginia in 1635. In Georgia, numerous generations of Carters worked as cotton farmers. Plains was a boomtown of 600 people at the time of Carter's birth. His father was a successful local businessman who ran a general store and was an investor in farmland. Carter's father had previously served as a reserve second lieutenant in the U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps during World War I. On December 12, 1974, Carter announced his presidential campaign at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. His speech contained themes of domestic inequality, optimism, and change. Upon his entrance in the Democratic primaries, he was competing against 16 other candidates and was considered to have little chance against the more nationally known politicians such as Wallace. His name recognition was very low, and his opponents derisively asked, "Jimmy who?" In response to this, Carter began to emphasize his name and what he stood for, stating, "My name is Jimmy Carter, and I'm running for president." Carter became the frontrunner early on by winning the Iowa caucuses and the New Hampshire primary. His strategy involved reaching a region before another candidate could extend influence there, traveling over 50,000 miles, 80,000 kilometers, visiting 37 states, and delivering over 200 speeches before any other candidate had entered the race. In the South, he tacitly conceded certain areas to Wallace and swept them as a moderate when it became clear Wallace could not win the region. In the North, Carter appealed largely to conservative Christian and rural voters. While he did not achieve a majority in most northern states, he won several by building the largest singular support base. Although Carter was initially dismissed as a regional candidate, he would clinch the Democratic nomination. During an interview in April 1976, Carter said, "I have nothing against a community that is trying to maintain the ethnic purity of their neighborhoods." His remark was intended as supportive of open housing laws but specifying opposition to government efforts to inject black families into a white neighborhood just to create some sort of integration. Carter's stated positions during his campaign included public financing of congressional campaigns, his support for the creation of a federal consumer protection agency, creating a separate cabinet-level department for education, signing a peace treaty with the Soviet Union to limit nuclear weapons, reducing the defense budget, a tax proposal implementing a substantial increase toward those who have the higher income, alongside a levy reduction on taxpayers with lower and middle incomes, making multiple amendments to the Social Security Act, and having a balanced budget by the end of his first term of office. On July 15, 1976, Carter chose U.S. Senator Walter Mondale as his running mate. Carter and Ford faced off in 3 televised debates, the first United States presidential debates since 1960. For the November 1976 issue of Playboy, which hit newsstands a couple of weeks before the election, Robert Shee interviewed Carter. While discussing his religion's view of pride, Carter said, "I've looked on a lot of women with lust. I've committed adultery in my heart many times." This response and his admission in another interview that he did not mind if people uttered the word fuck led to a media-feeding frenzy and critics lamenting the erosion of boundary between politicians and their private intimate lives. Preliminary planning for Carter's presidential transition had already been underway for months before his election. Carter had been the first presidential candidate to allot significant funds and a significant number of personnel to a pre-election transition planning effort, which then became standard practice. He set a mold that influenced all future transitions to be larger, more methodical, and more formal than they were. On November 22, 1976, Carter conducted his first visit to Washington, D.C. after being elected, meeting with Director of the Office of Management James Lynn and United States Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld at the Blair House and holding an afternoon meeting with President Ford at the White House. The next day, he conferred with congressional leaders, saying that his meetings with cabinet members had been very helpful and that Ford had offered his assistance if he needed anything. Relations between Ford and Carter were relatively cold during the transition. During his transition, Carter announced the selection of numerous designees for positions in his administration. A few weeks before his inauguration, Carter moved his peanut business into the hands of trustees to avoid a potential conflict of interest. He also asked incoming members of his administration to divest themselves of assets through blind trusts. Former President Jimmy Carter, who died at age 100 on Sunday in Plains, Georgia, had endured several health challenges in recent years. In 2019, he underwent surgery after breaking his hip in a fall. 4 years earlier, Carter was diagnosed with metastatic melanoma that had spread to his brain, though just months later, he announced that he no longer needed treatment due to a new type of cancer therapy he'd been receiving. In February of 2023, the Carter Center, the organization founded by the former president to promote human rights worldwide, announced that Carter, with the full support of his family and his medical team, would begin receiving hospice care at home. After a series of short hospital stays, former U.S. President Jimmy Carter today decided to spend his remaining time at home with his family and receive hospice care instead of additional medical intervention, the Carter Center said in a statement at the time. Carter was the oldest and longest-lived U.S. president, telling People magazine in 2015, when he was 95, that he never expected to be alive for as long as he has. Carter underwent elective surgery on August 2, 2015, at Emory University Hospital to remove a small mass in his liver, the Carter Center announced at the time. While the surgery was successful and doctors said he would make a full recovery, the surgery revealed further health challenges for the former president. On August 11, 2015, Carter said that the surgery on his liver revealed that he had cancer, and it spread to other parts of his body. I will be rearranging my schedule as necessary so I can undergo treatment by physicians at Emory Healthcare, he said in a statement through his organization. There is a history of cancer in Carter's family. His mother died of breast cancer. His father, 2 sisters, and brother all died of pancreatic cancer. Despite the health challenges in recent years, Carter credits his marriage to his wife, former First Lady Rosalynn Carter, for his longevity. It's hard to live until you're 95 years old, he told People magazine in 2019, a few weeks after his second fall. I think the best explanation for that is to marry the best spouse, someone who will take care of you and engage and do things to challenge you and keep you alive and interested in life.